Peace, everybody. It's Poet Deep, back with Best Foot Forward. And today I wanted to talk about um, identifying our triggers, learning how to communicate about them, and also setting the appropriate boundaries. So, first, many of us have had all types of traumatic experiences, from our childhood, or just at different points of our lives that have been very traumatic. And in that trauma, it has had a certain warping on our way of thinking, reasoning, and our way of being. Trauma does not affect everybody the same, and there are different types of traumas from different types of experiences. Um, some can be purely one of experience physical abuse, sexual abuse, um, close calls. You don't have to be touched in order to be traumatized. It could just be issues of abandonment, afraid that someone or people want to leave you from someone who has left you before, or you perceive that someone has left you before, but that's another matter about our perception of certain events, places, and people and things like that. But the point is that trauma is real. You know, it's real, regardless if certain aspects of it does not subscribe to our actual reality. The effects of trauma are very real, and the worst thing after already experiencing trauma is having triggers that you cannot check. It's hard to place your finger on. So, for one, in order to get a grasp on triggers, you have to identify what are the things that trigger you. Due to the fact that people are different, we have different ways in which how we've experienced different things. Triggers can vary. And for someone that does not understand, I mean, it can appear to be very bizarre, strange, weird, or nonsensical for people that don't understand. Smells, certain fragrances, or just smells, can take somebody's mind back. Because that's basically what a trigger is. That's established what a trigger is. A trigger is when something, happens, and whatever that something is, whether it's a sound, whether there's something that you're seeing, but it's something that is dealing in the world of senses, right? Of your senses, and it's resembling a traumatic experience that you've had in the past. And so you don't have to necessarily be in danger in the present moment when you're triggered, but there's something there that is resembling that takes you back, or takes us back, psychologically. And the tools and methods of how we reason with our abuse or that experience, because all trauma does not come from direct abuse always, but the experience and the encounter takes on that same energy. And we have to be able to identify, regardless of what other people think, regardless of what we think. Like I said, certain smells, certain colors. Someone had someone that they was unfortunately raped by, and they had on a certain color shirt. Just seeing somebody wear that same color shirt could be enough. Whatever smells was in the background. If someone has ever lost a loved one, and there was a certain song that was playing around that time, or when they found out, or things like that, it could be very traumatic for them to continue to hear that song. So we navigate and we reason differently with these experiences that we have. And in order to address part of our trauma, for one, I am not a counselor, I am not a psychologist, I'm not an expert, so I'm not coming like that. I'm just coming on a human level of understanding and learning more about my own traumas, but also engaging and interacting with other people and understanding their traumas to the best that I could. So identifying, that's a process. And as we identify, we have to learn how to communicate what our triggers are. And what becomes important in this process is that we can only be around people that are sensitive to that. Too many times we have people who that we regard as friends, our loved ones, and things like that, who just may not understand. They might think it's a joke. They might think it's something to play about and things like that. Or, like I said, they just don't understand the seriousness of it. So I believe that we should be very diligent about who we make our friends, who we put in our close space. Because when you have triggers, especially depending, some people might have triggers that hit every once in a while, and sometimes them triggers might not be that bad. Some people can have triggers that can mess up their whole day, and it takes them a whole day to recalibrate. Some people a whole week. Some people can go into triggers and it starts to create a whole past regressive level of behaviors that it's almost like they get consumed in a hole. So depending on what your triggers can do, you have to be mindful of that when dealing with the world. For some people, having a trigger is not a light thing, and especially if we don't have a grasp on those triggers when they're formulated, because sometimes triggers start to activate other triggers. So it's like a domino effect starts to take place. And some people don't understand enough about themselves to be like, whoa, I'm being triggered right now. This is what I need to do. This is what I need to focus on right now to deal with this trigger. Because if I don't deal with this trigger, I'm going to go into another trigger, then I'm going to go into another trigger. And so that's why the identification of triggers, and how we cope and what do we do with them, do we handle them in a progressive way that brings about true solutions, for ourselves? Do we clearly communicate these things? Because sometimes these triggers can be activated by your loved ones. It could be your spouse, it could be your children, it could be your family members, and different things like that. It could be people that you love dearly, and it's very important that conversations are had and understood, and you make the proper space for yourself depending on what those triggers are. Because sometimes people who don't know and they're trying to seem normal, because we feel like to be traumatized is to be abnormal, and to deal with that traumatization will stigmatize us. So we fake this normalcy, but the whole time all we're doing is bombarding our triggers to the extent that we end up having some unfavorable eruptions and things like that. So I believe that it's very we must be very careful about how we establish our boundaries with people. And we're not going to be able to properly establish our boundaries with people unless we understand what we're dealing with, and we're able to communicate about it in a healthy way. And if people show you in time that they don't understand, I don't think we should keep trying to reason with people about these things. We can't deal with them like that. We can't deal with them like that. We have to calculate, where should they be at in our lives. Some people that's in our lives, they don't deserve a place at all in our lives. Some people, they don't deserve to be as close. Some people, they need to be held at a certain distance. And that's the whole formula of life, is making these type of judgments, making these type of calls, these types of observations, examinations, and things like that. It's very deep. So I advocate for communication. Well, first, identification, communication, and let's see, I'm going with the Asians words for Asian at the end. So I'm trying to think of something else to summarize because I'm just going off the top of the head. So identification, communication, and basically I would say, if necessary, elimination of certain people and things like that. I could have did that last word better, more thoughtful. I could have been more thoughtful about it, but you get my point. Um, but we don't need to allow ourselves to keep re-traumatizing ourselves, and there are a lot of agents in disguise of trauma. For some of us, it could just be simply being on social media. It could be a lot of different things. So we want to be able to be very mindful about what we are actually feeding our spirit and how much do we understand about what we're being fed and what does that produce in our inner being. Who are we through different experiences and things like that? What has the power to change the course of your day positively or negatively? We need to be able to identify that. This Poet Deep. If you like this, share with a friend. Be sure to leave feedback. If you're seeing this on YouTube, subscribe to my channel. My website is iampoetdeep.com. Coming out March 3rd, I'm releasing a new single, Rabbit Hole. Check that joint out. It's about my thoughts on this pandemic and, the politics behind it. So you definitely want to catch that good work. Stay tuned, everybody. I appreciate those who take their time to listen and receive. Peace.